Okay, I'd like to call the November 27th, 2023 Peachtree City Planning Commission meeting to order. If you would all please stand and say the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I apologize being a little out of sorts. Unfortunately, Laura's not here and looking for the book and the gavel, and I think we have everything now, so that's good. Okay, Robin, any additions or deletions to the agenda?
Not tonight, no, sir.
Okay, any announcements or reports?
I did want to just update you on two items that you all have made recommendations on. The short-term rental ordinance the public hearing was held by the council at their last meeting, and they decided to not adopt an ordinance. Instead, they're going to regroup sometime earlier in the year, next year, with a series of workshops and committees citizen committees to kind of craft a new light touch ordinance. And so it is paused, not stopped. And then the annexation for the 2021 single-family homes that was sort of in the rear of the Shiloh Mobile Home Park, you all recommended 3-2 to disapprove, and it was also a split vote, but it was 3-2 to approve. So I did want to give you guys an update on that.
Thank you. Okay, next item, approval of minutes. Minutes from our October 23rd, 2023. Hopefully everyone's had an opportunity to take a look at the minutes. Any additions, deletions, corrections?
Just a quick addition that the first paragraph lists the other commissioners in attendance. It just doesn't list my name.
Oh.
I did see that.
Yeah, so that's the only addition that I have.
Okay, we'll get that fixed, and I'll bring. Actually, if that's the only change, maybe I can get a signature at the end, and we'll just fix that.
Okay.
Sorry about that.
Move to approve with that change.
Okay, so we have a motion to approve the minutes. Do we have a second?
A second.
Do we have a second? Any other discussion? Okay, all those in favor of approving the minutes from the October 23rd, 2023 meeting signify by saying aye.
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 All those against? Okay, minutes are approved with the correction. One second to get to it. Okay, so we do have a public hearing this evening, and that is PH 23-10 rezoning of about 11 acres at 1102 McDuff Parkway from AR to LUR. Before we progress, I'm going to go ahead and, now that I have the book, go over the public hearing procedures. When the public hearing is opened, members of the Planning Commission will become hearers. No action on their part is in order until the chairperson declares the hearing complete. The chairperson will allow each side equal opportunity to the floor. Individual members of the public will be given up to 5 minutes to state their case. And again, please try to stay at the 5-minute mark. First, city staff will present the request and provide an assessment of compliance with city code. Next, those supporting the issue will be heard, and that does include the applicant. Then those opposing the issue will be heard. Prior to closing the public hearing input portion of the meeting, city staff and the public will be given the opportunity to ask questions of either or both sides of the issue. When the chairperson is assured that input is complete, the public hearing shall be ended and the Planning Commission may then debate the issue and render a decision. All speakers from the public are asked to follow these rules. Come to the microphone and state your name and neighborhood prior to your remarks. Keep remarks under 5 minutes, and please do not repeat others' comments, and address all comments to the chairperson. Thank you. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to staff.
Thank you. So this is a triangular-shaped property located on the northwest side of the city. Here's a vicinity map, and you can see can see, this is the property that I just mentioned, right here, adjacent to the railroad line. But this map also includes the property just to the south of it. And that's because they would like to continue the already approved townhome subdivision on the south into this property on the north. So the one on the south is approved for 30 townhomes, and their request is up to 43. And they have created or carried the zoning conditions that were placed on the property to the south on this property. And that includes a 100-foot buffer on the western and southern property line, and a 50-foot undisturbed buffer along the right-of-way of the railroad. I did want to mention that the 50-foot is undisturbed in the railroad, but it is not undisturbed on this side, and so you may notice that there's a stormwater pond in that 100-foot landscape buffer. So just a reminder, I'm not going to go through each of these, but these are the criteria that the Georgia law says that we need to consider with rezoning. The first one is whether it conforms to the policy and intent of the land use plan. That's our comp plan, and that's what I'll go over tonight. But other things that we need to consider is whether the use is suitable to adjacent and nearby properties, and whether it will adversely affect the usability of those nearby properties, whether it has reasonable economic use as it's currently zoned, whether the proposal will result in burdensome use of existing streets, utilities, or schools, and that last one is sort of your catch-all, whether there are other conditions affecting the property that give grounds for either support or disapproval. So keep these in mind as we move forward. So the comprehensive plan consists of both policies and a future land use map shown here. But because this property was annexed into the city after the comprehensive plan was adopted in 2022, it doesn't have a future land use designation for it. It is, however, surrounded by what's called single-family cluster all around it. There's that green belt, single-family cluster from Maybach and Saranac. This designation was actually created. So there were some council comments at our last meeting, and so I went and looked back and found that it was created in the 1995 comp plan, and at that time it allowed up to 12 dwelling units per acre, which was carried forward all the way until the 2017 comp plan, which reduced the designation density down to 3 to 6 units per acre. So if that were the designation on this property, which it's not, but if it were, this density of 3.9 dwelling units per acre would meet that single-family cluster designation. Other comprehensive plan policies that apply to this property offset dense residential with greenbelts, parks, and plazas. And so I've brought up the buffers that are proposed. There is, with the 100-foot buffer that they've proposed and the 50-foot buffer that exists on the Crestwind side, there is a total of 150 feet between the rear property lines of the Crestwind and the townhomes themselves. Another policy is to encourage the use of high-quality building materials to reduce long-term maintenance liability. In this one, this is a new one for us, but we didn't have much information on the price point of these, and wanted to make sure that they were a quality product, and one way you can do that is to make sure that there are quality building materials used. And so staff is recommending, and for y'all's consideration, that the front of these homes be 100% brick or stone, and then the sides and rears be a combination of brick, stone, and that cement siding. The last one is to encourage housing to include aging in place elements, which include accessible design, bedroom suites, etc. Townhomes don't normally have bedrooms on the main, and so the staff is recommending that the homes, at least half of them, to meet this policy, should have either a ground level bedroom or a flex room, maybe like an office space that could be used as a bedroom, or an elevator or elevator shaft, the ability to add an elevator at a later date without doing major construction work to the homes. For reference, the Everton subdivision the part that is the oldest part, farthest to the south, some of those units, their taller units, do actually have elevators and elevator shafts in them for future conversion. So I've placed all the recommended conditions should you all consider approval of this. Many of these are consistent with the development to the south, or just our generic LUR zoning conditions, such as the setback being 25 feet, 20-foot building separation, at least 2 parking spaces, and at least one of these within a fully enclosed garage. There's that front facade being 100% brick or stone. Carrying the 50-foot undisturbed buffer along the railroad right-of-way and that 100-foot landscaping buffer along the western property line, with enhancements to ensure, enhancements of evergreen plantings to ensure a visual buffer. Just like the subdivision to the south, all internal streets need to be built to city standards as far as compaction, subgrade, etc., and that the HOA would be responsible for the maintenance of these and other community facilities within their development, as well as a statement of the proximity to the railroad on the final plat, which is available to home buyers in the future so that they're not surprised. It is an active railroad. So I do believe the applicant is here and can further provide some information for you.
Hello, Chairman, Planning Commissioners. Stephen Jones, law firm of Taylor English Juma, here today on behalf of the applicant. Thank you for the opportunity to appear before you. I will try not to reiterate everything that Ms. Caillou has gone through, but this is a extension of what we call Collier Hills. So we're calling it Collier Hills Phase 2. As you'll see, here's the property outlined in blue. This is an excerpt of the tax map. There is a railroad right-of-way running along the eastern side of the property. So the only viable access through the property is through the existing Phase 1 of Collier Hills, which I'll show you an overall concept of that. Here you can see better Phase 1 zoned LUR 20 that was recently rezoned last year. Phase 2 is AR. As Ms. Caillou noted, your ordinance provides that when property is annexed and there is not a zoning district assigned at the time of annexation, that AR is assigned. So that's why you've got an AR zoning here. At the time of annexation by the legislature, this property did have a commercial zoning applied to it. So by automatic operation of your code, AR was the base district applied to it. Here you'll see this is the Phase 1, as I mentioned, rezoned in July 2022 for LUR 20. And you'll see the stub out here with the connection that was anticipated. And then here's the connection. So really we are just continuing on the extension of Phase 1 onto this adjacent property, which has no other access, as I noted, but through Phase 1. And to one of your zoning conditions is a reasonable economic use is zoned. We would posit that the property does not have one as zoned to AR because you could not market it, zone it, or develop it as AR if you have to travel through a townhome development to get to something that is mandated by your code to be 1 acre lots. We are good and fine with all of staff's conditions with one exception. Under LUR 20, these townhomes to the base in Phase 1 were permitted to have siding which is either brick, stone, or cementous fiberboard, hardy plank. So we'd ask that we continue that there. We've had a discussion with staff and understand that the concern really is just to not have a homogeneous mixture of elevation materials or facade materials on the frontage of these. So what we would propose is that you permit or recommend that the condition be modified to be brick, stone, or hardy, but under the condition that there is a mixture of those uses or materials throughout the buildings. So we'd envision having one building that has a mixture of those materials, another building that has a different mixture of materials, and so on and so forth, which we think accomplishes the same thing. And the reason for that is consistency here. We don't want to have, we want this to look like one cohesive neighborhood and to be one cohesive neighborhood. And just the differentiating material facades would make that a little difficult. So we just asked to continue that same product mix through here, but also accommodating staff's concern of not having hardy plank, as it's known, continued throughout all of these units. Here's a zoom in, so you can see all the units here. We've proposed, this is a lift station, and then this is a tot lot or a playground. And then you'll see our stormwater facilities here. One of staff's recommended conditions, which we think is great and we want to carry through, but I'd like to discuss, is evergreen plantings within this buffer. So what we propose and what we would intend to do is, in the adjacent subdivision, Crestwind, there's a 50-foot buffer imposed by the condition when it was rezoned here. Then you have another 100-foot here. That's consistent with what was done down in phase 1, 100 plus the 50, which was permitted, or which was required when Crestwinds was rezoned. The only difference is in phase 1, you've got a utility easement. So we actually see an added benefit in this because there is no utility easement. Instead, you just go straight to your buffer. So again, we would propose an evergreen planting row here to provide that buffer in addition to the natural buffer that already exists. The next few slides I want to walk you through are just zoom ins of the plan. So you can just see the lift station here and the playground here. With that, this is a different view so we could get it all for phase 2 on the same screen. So here you're looking up is west, and back, the cul-de-sac is pointed north. So the street's oriented north to south. With that, if you have any questions that I can address at this time, I'd be happy to do that. One final point, staff asked about price point. We'd envision these based on the market that's available right now to be in the mid-4s, but that is, of course, driven by the market. With that, Commissioners, if you have any questions for me, I'd be happy to address those at this time.
We'll go ahead and hold off to the period afterwards.
Okay.
And I'm sure we'll probably have some questions and some comments during that time.
Thank you, Chairman.
But thank you. Okay, with that, I'm going to go ahead and open the floor to any resident supporting the public hearing item. Do we have anyone in support? Okay, with no one in support, we're going to go ahead and open it up to those opposing. If you
Good evening, it's Teresa Smith and I live in Crestwind. I have comments in several areas. First of all, thank you for your time. Related to trees and green space, there are many very mature, large, beautiful trees that are in that buffer that's being referenced that are hardwoods. Those trees provide Crestwind homeowners along Hazelnut and Silver Bell Court a natural noise barrier from the railroad and also from the traffic on Sonoy Road. They also obviously provide a natural habitat for birds and other wildlife. At a minimum, if you do decide to approve and there are conditions on, we would ask not to allow any disturbance of that natural barrier that's already there for those large hardwoods and that the rest of that area. The entrance on McDuff. As has already been stated, there's only one way in and one way out with no possible other access. Where it intersects McDuff, it's just west of Sonoy Road, starting down the hill from the railroad tracks. Traffic east and westbound currently passes entrances to Wilkesmore and Crestwind at the same place. They're directly across from each other. This would add a third subdivision entrance in a very short distance within those existing entrances and Sonoy Road. It's already difficult during morning hours and after school or work hours to enter or exit from our subdivisions. There's a safety concern now and a new entrance that close with as many new cars as that would bring in. In the July hearing, it was stated there would be 70 additional residences, so we were expecting that that could be well over a couple hundred additional residents and cars. The new fire station that's expected to be built across from Crestwind, we're asking for consideration of that, and that there be a traffic study by adding the new entrance and the additional traffic. For the topography, the power lines, the water runoff is the next area that I wanted to talk about. Power lines bisect the portions of each of those two parcels, which we've already talked about. The developer originally planned 36 units, but in July, in the July 10th hearing, had decreased that to 30. And when you ask, they said it was because of some of the challenges with the topography, making sites unbuildable. With the property being considered for rezoning, the power lines are on the east side, which means the houses in phase 1 would push, because of the power lines, push closer to the railroad tracks. The houses in phase 2 would all push much closer to Crestwind. So it would border Crestwind, not on the other side of the property. If it's approved, we're concerned that the height of those homes being built behind and close enough to Crestwind single-story homes could impact privacy and value of the homes if they're close by. And the residents on Silver Bell have already experienced some water runoff issues that they've been working with the city on in different occasions, which I'm sure you're aware of. Additional runoff from additional residential build back there. Or high-density build there. We're concerned with what that might do and how do we make sure that doesn't become more severe. A couple comments from board members that were made during that July 10th meeting were that this is a difficult parcel to do anything and, quote, very tight with retention pond and the railroad. You also expressed some concern about access going in and out for emergency equipment. You also expressed concerns for barriers, privacy fences, and that you had concerns to discuss in subsequent hearings about green space and activities for the residents, which is related to the property that's being requested and discussed this evening. There were also comments from some of you on the board, or from at least one of you on the board, that high-density housing was envisioned to be within walking distance of city centers, and that this does not meet that requirement, and that you believed it, quote, shouldn't have been rezoned, approved as rezoned in the past, but that wasn't what you were here for in July. And that, quote, it doesn't meet the criteria of our comprehensive plan for Peachtree City, and was, quote, not in the spirit of Peachtree City community. You also noted you would want park and recreation facilities to be added for the second phase, which is the land that's being considered this evening. During that July 10th conceptual plat review, one of you mentioned that there are other townhomes down McDuff. While that's true that there are townhomes down McDuff in Everton, they're embedded in the much larger neighborhood, and they have a very large clubhouse, several other amenities and activities that were in existence for that larger neighborhood. So in summary, I appreciate your consideration and request that you make the recommendation to deny the rezoning request. If you do not recommend denying it, then please delay making a recommendation until a comprehensive traffic and safety study can be completed, and you can further consider whether this meets the comprehensive plan for Peachtree City.
Thank you.
I'm Suzanne Brown, and I live in Crescent Oak. At 8:12 p.m. on February the 3rd, 2023, excuse me, sparks shot out from underneath the Norfolk Southern freight train as it passed through Salem, Ohio. By 8:55 p.m., 38 of the train's cars derailed in East Palestine. The derailed equipment included 11 tanker cars carrying hazardous materials that ignited, fueling fires that damaged another dozen cars. The EPA attempted to restrict the flow of contaminated water. They ordered a shelter-in-place order for the 5,000 people in the nearby town, and an evacuation order was issued for the area within a mile radius of the actual train crash due to an explosion risk. Many of us watched over the ensuing days, weeks, and months as citizens were displaced, subjected to volatile organic compounds such as vinyl chloride and butyl acrylate. It may take years to gather statistics about cases of cancer that developed due to the toxic air, water, and soil those residents were subjected to. Life is a series of choices that we have to make in our lives. Is it advisable to build medium or high density housing within 100 feet of railroad tracks? No, it's not. Can anyone explain the real reason why there's a 150-foot buffer between the proposed townhouses and the Crestwind subdivision, but less than a 100-foot buffer between the proposed townhouses and the center of the CSX railroad tracks? Is Crestwind more of a danger than the railroad tracks? I don't think so. How long is the average railroad tanker car? The average 50 feet in length. Some are as long as 60 feet. If that derails behind your house, it could be 30 feet from your back door. Our land plan has always required lower density as you move to the border of the city, and for good reason. This proposal is a free-for-all for the developer, and the city is not in the business of sacrificing the desires of the citizens in our land plans so that real estate developers can reap the most profit. In cities like Peachtree City, the bulk of residential neighborhoods were planned to be further away from the railroad tracks. Commercial and industrial properties are okay in close proximity to the tracks themselves to reduce the negative impact on residences from vibration, noise, and the potential damage from a derailment. In recent years, the City Council disregarded our traditional land plans. At the same time, we have generally seen the Planning Commission vote in favor of maintaining the integrity of land plans, thanks to you guys. That is what we need, for you to vote to comply with our traditional land plans. What should have been our industrial park and bypass route became residential developments. I personally witnessed one such bad decision on July 12th, 2022, when the City Council rezoned the 6.4 acres, the property adjacent to the subject property tonight, from general industrial to LUR. I just ran my campaign on a strong platform in opposition of multifamily housing and poor zoning decisions. The results of the election made it abundantly clear that the citizens want to follow that platform. In July 2022, when the City Council approved 30 townhouses on the adjacent property, that was a mistake on their part. The property owner obtained this piece of landlocked property through legislative annexation to change it from Tyrone to Peachtree City. No matter what you decide to recommend, the owner of the front property is legally obligated to give right-of-way access to the landlocked property, regardless of the zoning. In their narrative, the applicant claims the property does not have a reasonable economic use as presently zoned because the AR zoning limits the use and development of the property primarily to general agricultural use, forestry, one-family dwelling homes, and horticultural purposes. They go on to claim that the default zoning as AR would create a practical difficulty and would prevent the applicant from using the property in an economically viable manner. This is typical real estate developer jargon, which really means he bought a piece of property and thinks we owe it to him to maximize his potential profit. We have no such obligation. The city in no way pressured the applicant to purchase this piece of property. They claim the property is not economically viable. Then why did he purchase it? What a ridiculous game they are playing here. Based on the size of the property, the AR zoning allows the owner to divide the property into buildable estate-sized lots and to build a low-density housing on the city's border. That would actually comply with the land use plan. The AR zoning is economically viable, just not the way the owner prefers. Again, that was his risk. Based on the recent election results, I'm hoping you are going to vote in opposition to this request and instead support our traditional land use plan. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have anyone else in opposition?
I'm Dennis Andretto with Crestwind, and I don't want to take your time reiterating what's already been said, but I am in agreement with what hasn't been said by the two people before me. I was not aware that there already was one approved project when I walked by the entrance to that property that's in question. And I'm here because of the loss of the trees and the wildlife corridor that now exists between the railroad and Crestwind. I'm a little bit amazed that anybody would want to live in those homes that are the subject of tonight's hearing because of the high power line, the high voltage power line that runs by there. And I didn't see on the drawings where that was relative to both of the developments, the one that's apparently already been approved and the one that's in question right now. But I am concerned about the traffic issues, the viability, economic viability of those proposed homes, and the impact that this project would have to Crestwind neighborhood. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm David Freeman. I live in Crestwind. And I too am opposed to the project. However, I would like to say this, if the project goes forward, I'd like the board to consider stipulating that the barrier, the evergreen barrier that will be constructed, eliminate the use of pine trees as one of the items, or our great cedars that we see everywhere, which are now dying. And I would like to say that recommendation for the green giant arborvitae, which is not subject to disease or pests as are the others. The reason I don't like pine trees is because we recently witnessed pine trees falling into people's yards and coming very close to homes. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else in opposition?
Good evening. My name's Dave Mathis. I'm a resident of Crestwind. I'm opposed to the development for all of the reasons that have been stated so far, and I would just like to add that the Federal Railroad Association has tracked so far in 2023 742 derailments through October. I think that this development really presents a danger. I think there will at some point be some kind of rail derailment or accident that will require people to evacuate, and I think that'll be very difficult to do on a congested McDuff Parkway, especially during high traffic times. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Opposition?
My name is Nancy Steptoe. I'm a Crestwind resident. I live on Hazelnut and experience the vibrations from the rail operations. I would think that any construction closer to the rail would definitely need some, I'll say, higher quality building materials, because those vibrations definitely can disturb walls, floors, what have you. I noticed that the staff had included information regarding the exterior of the buildings, but I'm not sure what the requirements are for the actual overstructure of it. I didn't see any information directed towards the height of the proposed buildings. That could be also a consideration. So obviously, if the building quality is not up to snuff, very shortly you would have deterioration in the subdivision, and that is a concern. I am definitely opposed to this. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have anyone else in opposition? Okay, if there's no one else, we're going to go ahead and open it up to questions. The questions can be asked of staff, can be asked of the applicant. Does anyone in the public have any questions they would like to ask? If you please. Can you go to the microphone? Yes, thank you.
There must be an easement for the power line that runs through the development. And my question is, how is that easement reconciled with the development of two properties and the way they're situated?
Can you pull up the PowerPoint, please? There we go. So the utility easement is here, and you can see it in this lightly dashed line. So it borders the phase one, we'll call it, and then the road crosses underneath it, and then it continues out this way. Does that answer the question?
Okay. Do we have any other questions?
There was a question raised about what the expected height is, the elevation of the buildings. Can we get an answer to that?
Well,
But-
yeah, if the
yeah.
applicant can.
Does the
come up
applicant
and-
have any information concerning the height of the proposed structures?
Yeah, that's governed by two things. Number one, your zoning ordinance, and number two, the International Building Code for residences, which I believe it's 30 feet,
35.
35, before you get to a different class of structure. But generally, townhomes are less than that, in about the 30-ish range.
So 2 stories?
Two to three, yeah. But again, that's governed by the International Building Code. And to another point, in terms of a buffer and the evergreens, what we've done in the past and what we found is effective, number one, based on noise from the railroad, the row of evergreens has been shown, and I've done it on industrial projects, we've done it on industrial projects, to provide an effective sound barrier, more so than a natural forest, because they are densely packed together, right? And so they grow together. And another thing that developers try to do is to vary the species. To another comment about including arborvitae as opposed to, bless you,
Thank you.
as opposed to pine trees. So when you change out the species and run that through in a staggered row, or staggering the species, that also ensures that they are not susceptible to disease and that your vegetative buffer remains whole and intact. So just to give you an idea of kind of the thought process behind evergreen rows to provide not only a visual buffer, but also a sound buffer. So we would hope that the evergreen row would provide a improvement for sound buffering, as we've seen in the past, and as we've seen as effective. I just want to make one comment about the comp plan, if I may. Chairman had the liberty. His staff noted in their report that this is consistent with the comp plan, and it's on the low end of the permitted density of the comp plan for the surrounding area. there's any other questions, I'd be more than happy to field those.
The retention area, the retention pond, how many trees can you put on either side of that? And wouldn't that constitute a direct channel of sound from the railroad with the gaps between the building and then having a retention pond on it?
So the intent is to put the evergreen row along the back side of the retention pond, providing a sound wall and a visual wall between the Crestwind subdivision and the proposed phase 2. Again, that's a consistent application as compared to phase 1. We're really continuing the phase 1 trend, and staff has proposed conditions which are consistent with phase 1. So that's why we view this rezoning as a natural progression of what was rezoned in phase 1. Again, this parcel is naturally connected and physically connected to this parcel such that it is only developable through the phase 1 subdivision. And that's why we said in our letter of intent that it does not have an economically viable use, which is the constitutional test to determine if the present zoning applied to the property renders it viable or not. So again, that row would run right here along the back side of the property line behind the pond as opposed on the other side. So you're isolating this development from the other. And that's consistent with the other side, phase 1.
Okay. Any other questions?
So 2 other questions. We talked about a natural buffer, and we talked about what would be a 150-foot buffer between. Now we're talking about a row of trees. Row of trees doesn't inspire confidence that there really is a true buffer when we talk about putting one row of trees beside a pond. That's might be a question, it might be commentary, but I would like to understand more about what that buffer really looks like or would need to be. So that certainly would be a question. A curiosity is, I listened initially in July when you did the consideration on the concept plan and the number of townhomes in the phase 1 had changed. When you ask what the expected number of townhomes was going to be in phase 2, that number was given by the developer as 70. So if it was 70 and now it was 70 additional, that was very specifically asked. It was also asked about when amenities have to be added, and that was at 100. That I believe that you had replied with, Ms. Kalu. And then now that's at 43. If that number changes, I'd like to understand what approvals have to come in if that number is to be increased at all.
So they're asking for an LUR zoning, which is what they ask for, is what they would be granted. So there would be no more than 43 units in this phase. So added with the 30 that's below, that's 73.
But they had absolutely stated the question was very specifically asked by some of the gentlemen on the board. Is it 70 additional, and how many do you expect to have in the entire development? And it was probably a little less than 100. And I can tell you where it says that, how many minutes, how many seconds.
I understand that, but I'm trying to reassure you that there will not be, if this is approved, there will not be more than 73 total. So whether he misunderstood the question at that time in July, or maybe he didn't have all the information when he responded, what they've got now, they've done this conceptual engineering plan, and it shows that they may be able to fit up to 43. Now, it may be reduced when they come in, if it's approved, and they come in for a conceptual plat, you may actually see 40, because they really get into the fine grain of the engineering and find that they can't quite fit even the 43. But what, if it's approved, they would be allowed to is up to and no more than 43.
Help me understand the buffer you plan to put in versus the natural trees that we have there now. I understand it was called an undisturbed on the railroad track side, but disturbed on the Crestwind side. What's gonna happen to all of those 50 to 100-year-old trees that border Silver Bell Court and Hazelnut Drive right now? Are any of those gonna be left?
Thank you, sir. And to clarify that, this is, staff has noted this as not an undisturbed buffer. The undisturbed buffer would be here. But for purposes of development, the only portion that we would need to disturb is where the pond is here. And so what we would propose really is that evergreen buffer would really run more like this and lip out for the pond. So the majority of the existing trees would remain here, and then we would have the added benefit for the sound buffer, which you've heard folks request, here. So along the back side of the townhomes, around the pond to provide a visual buffer around the pond, and then up the other side of the buffer. So the vast majority of the buffer would remain undisturbed, leaving those mature trees that the gentleman just referenced.
I would really wish that you had a great traffic study in hand before you make a decision on this piece of property. Perhaps you already do, I don't know. But that intersection where this road is going to come into MacDuff is over the hill from the railroad track quickly.
Are you requesting a traffic study?
I would love to have a traffic study, if that's possible, before you make a decision here, because MacDuff, as busy as it is now, that intersection where Wilkesmore and Crestwind come together is just to the west of where this road's gonna come in. When we left there today, we had to get out to a four-way stop before we could get out. I mean, it was literally lined up all the way to Sonoy Road at that stoplight.
I understand.
So that's one thing I'd like to do. The other, just a comment, a couple of comments.
Well, this is questions.
Okay, I got a question.
Okay. I appreciate it. Thank you.
All right, my question is, on the price point that you brought up, I understood you to say mid-400s. Is that right?
It's dictated by the market, but that base where the market is right now, that's what we.
Okay. I don't have a question, I got a statement to you. The mid-400s are the old threes. Inflation shot these prices up, so I don't know what he's building in the mid-400s, but they're not what they were 5, 10 years ago. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. With respect to the price point and the quality of the homes, that's one of the reasons that staff has the recommended conditions, which they've carried over from phase 1 to phase 2 for building materials. Building materials, especially on the front elevations, ensure a high-end product as well as a high-end price point. Those materials that staff has required, even with the modification that we've had requested, are high-end building materials. So that would dictate and drive the quality of the product that's built out there. And as to traffic, our understanding is that when phase 1 was zoned and when the conceptual plat was approved recently, that it was anticipated for the overall development of the site. Your code actually spells out specific requirements for traffic studies and thresholds for those. And it's my understanding that we are below the threshold for a required traffic study. If we were above that, of course, we would follow that, but I do not believe that we have met the threshold.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions?
Last question is, can we get is there any information, and you gave us some about the elevation, information on what the square footage is expected to be, or the minimum square footage or average square footage of the homes?
Based on again, these are market-driven products, and based on the market where townhomes are right now, they would be in excess of about 2,200 square feet plus, and that's dictated by the width of the building as well as height requirements. So, pretty, kind of simple math, as well as market conditions.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Chairman.
Okay. There are no more questions. I'm going to go ahead and close the public portion of the hearing. And I'm going to open it up to commissioners. I'm going to start with Commissioner Reeves. Any questions? We're going to do questions first.
Yes, thank you. The first question I have concerns the application for phase one. If I understood correctly, the application was for LUR 20, LUR 20, and this is LUR. I kind of heard an explanation from Mr. Jones as to what the different setbacks are, what the different requirements may be. But what is the difference? Why was one application for LUR 20 and one application is just for LUR?
So the number after, we will assign a number after it's,
Okay.
if it's approved. So this one may be 21, it may be 22. It
Okay.
just, the number doesn't indicate anything other than help staff find the conditions that are specifically for that property.
Perfect. The other question I had is, what is actually the status of phase one? Is it already under construction or what?
They have submitted a preliminary plat and it's not approved yet. They need to make some revisions for it before we can approve that. So it's at its early development process.
Okay. I also heard someone from the public speak about a new fire station. Do we know anything about that? And is there a fire station, and where is it gonna be on the
Sure.
maps that we're looking
I can
at?
tell you what I know,
Okay.
but what I know is that it's up for change. So, this property, oh, it does, poo, it's not on the map. I just said poo, sorry. There was about, oh, it doesn't even go off. There was about 3 acres that was, when this entire corridor was rezoned back in 2007, one of the many conditions was that the developer dedicate space for a fire station. And that property is where it's planned for. We have building plans for it. We just need to find the money. As he said, the cost of construction is going up.
Another question I have for you is this. It is very close to the railroads, and I'm curious whether or not there are different standards for houses built close to a railroad.
Not in the state of Georgia, no ma'am.
Not in the state of Georgia, okay. Let me just see. As far as the trees that you plan on planting along the border, what I just understood a second ago is that most of the trees will remain. However, we're talking about trees along the back of the property?
Yeah, what he just pointed out to us was to actually line this side and then go around the pond and then come back on this side of it so that the front facing Cresswind would stay undisturbed, but then they would also add the evergreen along the western side. This wasn't a staff recommendation, but you all can require a tree survey and say, you know, identify specimen trees and require that that be part of their site plan so that when we review it, when staff reviews it, we're aware that a specimen tree is located very close by and is it able to tweak the location of the cul-de-sac so to not impact this specific specimen tree. That's something we could do.
Okay, I like that idea. I'd like to possibly consider that. And it's one of the things you and I have talked about a couple times, and we're looking at, in my opinion, basically 100 houses going in there. We're talking about 70 some, but you know, I'm sure there'll be a car in each one of those houses, at least one, right? The majority of them will probably have two. We've discussed it before, and there is a certain stress threshold that you've told me about concerning doing a traffic study. But just like we can request a tree study, can we not request a traffic study of the developer?
I mean, you can ask it as a recommendation, sure.
Okay.
Will they have it by December 7th? Unlikely. I don't want to speak for them, but it's very unlikely. I'm not going to make any friends by saying what I'm about to say. But there is a traffic study for the entire McDuff Parkway when it was designed to include all of the development, including the remaining undeveloped portion of the area that we are now considering for development. So the original development included Cresswind and all of Everton. But there's all this other land, especially on the north side, that they included. And they calculated it at an industrial rate. And the industrial rate is much higher and much bigger impact than your standard residential. And so there is excess capacity. Now, I know when I'm sitting in that traffic circle, or it's not a circle, I think it should be. When I'm sitting in that four-way traffic stop at Cresswind every night on my way home, I know that that is a peak condition, and boy, I would love it to not back up as far as it does. But road design is based on what you need over a long period of time, not necessarily just for peaks. And so I'm not a traffic engineer. I played one about 20 years ago, but the ITE, trip generation numbers, are likely to show that the trip generation for this property developed at a residential density instead of industrial is actually lower than it was planned for. And I'm sorry to be the bearer of bad news.
Okay. I think the public did a fine job of asking questions, because some of those questions were some that I had about the square footage and the height. So I think that's all for me, Chairman.
Thank you, Commissioner Reeves.
Thank you.
Commissioner Johnson?
Yes, a couple of my questions were already brought up and answered, but so regarding the phase one, this is for the developer. So even though it's not complete yet, how much of it has been sold already? Do you have that?
It's still in design and permitting, so there have been no pre-sales, no.
There have been no pre-sales, okay.
That'll typically come after you've broken ground and started to go at least horizontal.
Okay. And then my other question was just regarding the power line. Does anyone know like how high that is, the power line that was brought up?
How high? I'm sorry, I don't.
Okay. That's all I had.
Thank you. Commissioner Hamner?
All right, few questions. First question's for the applicant. Was looking through some notes, the last time we were talking about phase one, and, it said that, that you guys had reached out to Crestwind, had talked to them, heard them out in terms of some of the concerns that they had and everything like that, which is great. For phase two, have you done anything similar in terms of talking with the Crestwind residents that are buffering up to this proposal? And if so, how have those conversations impacted the phase two planning?
Yeah, so we have been in contact with the HOA, just like we did with phase one. The impetus for the Evergreen Row was based on that conversation.
Got it. Thank you. And then for city staff, well, the traffic study threshold, we answered that question, so thank you for that. Earlier, the applicant said that this proposal stays in line with the comp plan density. Does city staff have any opinion on that?
I mean, it's not in the comp plan, so
Right.
it's hard to say that this is compliant with the comp plan. There is no future land use for this property in the comp plan. It is surrounded by SFC, and if that were considered an appropriate use by this board, adjacent to the border of the city, as you can see, we have different conditions around the border of our city. If you think that's an appropriate land use for this property, it would satisfy that category.
Understood.
If you think that SFM is more appropriate in this property, then it would not satisfy that.
Understood. Thank you. That's all.
Okay. Commissioner Chris?
Thanks. Just a few questions for staff. Does the current zoning of AR restrict removal of vegetation or trees in that area?
No. It's protected. In fact, the state of Georgia protects timbering in agriculturally zoned properties, so we cannot stop them from timbering that property.
Got it. So as we've heard today, we're looking at a total townhome count of about 73 homes between this property and the property directly to the south. What requirements are necessary from the city when you get to that 100 threshold?
That would trigger both the parks requirement and
Which is?
I can't remember off the top of my head. I've got a lovely checklist that's posted on our city website. It is some amount of acreage per 100 units.
Got it.
And then it would trigger the potential for a traffic study by the city engineer.
Okay. Those are the only two things that would come into effect if they went over that threshold?
Those are the two things that come to mind right away. The other conditions that apply to this property apply whether it's 100 or 70 or 50 units. It's connection to the multi-path system is required. Landscaping, 2 trees for every unit is required. So that's in addition to those buffers, is a requirement of our ordinance. But I think those are the two, to the best of my memory, yes, sir.
The proposal that they've submitted, the applicant has submitted, shows a park to be constructed within the property. When a developer wants to put a park in a piece of their property as they develop it, does the city get involved in that, just out of curiosity?
So it's shown on the plan, so we'll require that it be constructed. Similar to like a mail kiosk, it has to be in place before the first home is sold so that it's available. It would have to meet, our Recs department will look at the specs of it. Most likely it'll be something that's purchased off of a provider, and our Recs department would look at it to make sure that it meets national safety standards. But other than that, color of it, design of it, the city does not get involved.
Got it. And not to say that we would approve this, but if we did, could we create a condition to require Recreation Department approval of the park's construction?
I mean, you can, but that's actually part of our process. So anytime somebody installs a tot lot and it's open to, I mean, I know it's, but think about that Ardenley one,
Yeah.
where it's very accessible. Even though they've got signs that say, hey, this is private, please don't use it, it's still very public, very accessible. We still review it to make sure that it meets those national standards.
Got it. Okay, and then, you know, I was surprised not to see with the larger development any cart paths sort of in that green belt. Just out of curiosity, is that something that we could also require to make it look and feel more like Peachtree City? Or is that something that would have to be redeveloped into their platting when they bring the platting to us?
So you're asking about whether or not we could maybe require a cart path in this buffer?
Yeah, correct.
I mean, you can, that's certainly an option. Just keep in mind that that means trees have to be removed.
Yeah, yeah.
If you did that, I would request that it be part of the HOA requirements to maintain, because with our wonderful system, we do actually look for opportunities to use low volume, slow speed internal roads, neighborhood roads to supplement. And so if you asked or made that request as part of your recommendation, I would ask that you make it a requirement of the HOA to maintain.
Great. No further questions.
Okay. Mr. Leota?
Mr. Chairman, I do have a few questions. I have some questions for the applicant as a follow-up to some of the great questions that we got from the public. And I may have some questions for staff as we get into some of the other things. I have some questions about the units to start with. And there were some questions about the height, how many stories. So what is the topographic change from the Crestwinds site to this site? Is Crestwinds higher? Is this site lower? And what will the view be from the western side of the property?
Commissioner, my understanding is the topography is about even between the two. So the view, you'd be looking through that 100-foot buffer that we proposed into the evergreen screen, and then, and only then, if you could see through it, would you see the townhomes. Generally, you know, the product mix now is something in that 30-foot range for like a 3-story townhome. So, you know, you would still be below the tree line of the existing buffer, and then with the addition of the evergreen buffer, you know, you've got 2 buffers, right? You've got the undisturbed or the natural outside of the pond, and then the evergreen.
Thank you. And I think earlier you indicated that these were 2 to 3 story units.
That's correct.
Yeah, have any more definition beyond, or are they going to be a maximum of 3 story? I mean, can you describe how the unit works? Is it?
We have not selected a builder at this time. We're going to do one builder for the whole phase, so the exact product mix. But as to Ms. Kayu's point on the International Building Code, would limit you on a residential product to 35 feet max, which then dictates how many stories you're going to have internally and what that product's going to look like. And then you've also, oh, sorry, Commissioner.
That's all right. Go ahead.
May I? You also have the staff recommended condition as to the building materials as well.
Okay.
So really the only thing that the individual builder would select, right, is should it be the will of this commission to allow us to do a mixture of those materials throughout, what the mixture of the materials would be.
The ground floor of the units, it's composed of how many garage units, how many garage slots, what's else is on the ground floor?
So typically with this type of product in the general market, the market wants a 2-car garage. To get, and we would like a 2-car garage, with the design and with the condition for some of the age in place requirements, you might have some less than that to get, I guess what I'm trying to say is, if I want a master on the main, a walk-in master, I might opt for, as a buyer for a smaller garage, to have a larger master on the main. But then that'll really just be dictated by the market. So we'd really prefer a two-car with, the more living space above.
Is that generally what the site plan is showing, a driveway to each unit, 2 cars wide?
Correct.
Okay. Do you anticipate any kind of storage area in these units? And the reason for my question on that is, I know how I use my garage. I don't use it for cars. I use it for a lot of storage. And I live in a single-family, 3-bedroom home. My concern is, with a townhome product, that the garages may typically be used for storage. And then you don't have cars in the garages, so you have them out on the driveway. So we get to what happens to visitors. You're not proposing any visitor spaces at this point.
So, great question. That's one of the reasons that we prefer 2-car garages. That's one of the reasons also why you see driveways in the front of the units as well. So you get effectively multiple parking spots per each unit. I don't know about your specific design codes, but I would anticipate that at least somewhere on here we would have some sort of Fall Street parking.
Robin, what is the requirement, the parking code for townhomes? Do we have one?
That you need to have 2 units per dwelling unit, 2 parking spaces per dwelling
Okay.
unit. So if they have a garage, or they've got this driveway that's large enough to park 2 cars, our ordinance would say that satisfies the requirement, minimum requirement.
Okay.
Do you have the ability to request or require, 4 extra guest parking spaces, or, I'm thinking 4 to 7 is an appropriate number for 70 units. That's 1 extra parking space per 10 dwelling units. That seems like a reasonable request. It was originally, I believe, that there was some shown down here, but you have the opportunity to put a few in certain areas. By the children's playground might be appropriate.
Okay. Yeah, I guess the reason I was asking about the parking is that the way the layout is, there's really effectively no parking available on the street in front of the units, because you have so many driveway spaces lined up together. And I certainly think that there needs to be some kind of visitor parking. And in the prior plan back in July, I know there were more spaces in the plan than that was ultimately approved. And 3 for that proposed phase 1, I think, is minimal. So if we're looking at a ratio of 3 for 30, we're looking at 7 for 70, maybe a 10% number might be a reasonable, like what Robin has indicated. But I do think the way people use their dwellings, particularly townhomes, from my experience, you need some guest parking. I have some access questions regarding sidewalks. Does the development propose sidewalks?
Commissioner?
Yes.
Could I address your parking concern?
I'm sorry, yes, please.
We agree it would be amenable to some off-street parking. We do show that. Generally, we get into that more when we get into design concept. But to the extent feasible, I do like maybe 1 for every 10 units or something like that, in addition to what you'd have for the kiosk.
Okay, thank you. So to the sidewalk question, are we proposing sidewalks or towards the question about cart paths, a multi-use path?
At this time, we have not
Okay.
contemplated any multi-use path. There is, the multi-use path plan shows it along McDuff with crossings. So we anticipated it to be internal to the site. You know, I don't think we're opposed to a multi-use or sidewalks throughout. You know, the only issue with multi-use and sidewalks is just squeeze and the things you trade off. But that's certainly a policy's decision for this commission.
And I was just wondering how the children would get to the playgrounds without walking in the street.
Which is why sidewalks would
Okay.
fit.
Couple more questions. One of the notes on your plan C 6.0 talks about the length of the road and that you're requesting something that is in excess of 1,200 feet in terms of the road length. Do we know what the total length of the road is in both phases?
Shoot.
I believe it's 2,100 linear feet.
Okay. So in circumstances where the road is longer than the code allows, what kind of mitigation or design can be incorporated into the plan to address that issue? Because it's somewhat of a safety issue for emergency service access to an extremely long dead end.
Absolutely. And that's something that I think we would generally defer to the time of engineering when your Public Works Department looks at the plan. And that's generally a condition that we get back on comments of, hey, you need to do something here or there. And I don't want to speak for your engineer, but various engineers in various jurisdictions, and sometimes various engineers in the same jurisdiction have various schools of thought of what they prefer. So whatever comes out of the plan review at the time of land disturbance plan, we'll take whatever the engineer recommends.
Okay.
Yeah, it would actually, it would go through our fire marshal, and in neighborhoods like Crestwind, you'll see some of those bump outs, and you may wonder why, and it's for this very reason, is because what is essentially a very long cul-de-sac, they add these bump outs at certain points, and he decides where those need to be. And so in this case, you have what's shown as a cul-de-sac, but could actually be designed specifically to meet what our equipment needs are for like a turnaround.
Okay. And the last question I have right now has to do with the buffer on the west side. We're maintaining the existing trees, and then you talked about adding some evergreens along the eastern edge and around the basin area. Are you opposed at all to reforesting the basin area to supplement the loss of the existing vegetation in that 100-foot buffer?
Fundamentally, that's an engineering question.
Yeah, if you could you clarify?
Well, what I mean is just replanting the basin, since you're going to construct a stormwater management facility in an existing landscape vegetated area. It needs
Okay.
to be replaced with something other than, I think, an evergreen buffer directly behind the townhomes.
Okay, so you're not asking to replant in the stormwater facility itself?
Potentially the side slopes.
Okay, yeah, our city engineer is very strict
Against
about
that?
that. He gets twitchy about keeping trees at least 15 feet away from these sloped
Okay.
walls, and so he's very particular about that. But if you mean basin as the general water distribution area of it, I mean, they have the ability to replant on their property, but we can't force them to plant on somebody else's property because we can't give
Right.
away somebody else's property rights. Does that make sense?
Yes. So if there's the ability to plant on all sides of the basin to address some of the vegetation removal, that I think would be desirable, in my opinion.
So Commissioner, you're talking about, to the extent the city engineer approves, replanting in any area that we've cleared?
In the basin area.
I think that's, yeah.
I think that's reasonable.
Okay. Mr. Chairman, those are all the questions I have at this point in time.
Okay, thank you. Question for staff, and I'm trying to go back through my notes, and I just unfortunately cannot locate it. And maybe to the applicant also. Question concerning Phase 1. Could refresh my memory concerning structure height for Phase 1? Are we still looking at the same 2 to 3 stories, same general square footage as we're looking at Phase 2?
That's correct, Chairman. I don't recall, Ms. Caillou,
I don't think there was a minimum unit size as a condition, because I carried all the conditions over.
Right.
But if you wanted to add one, and he's saying that they're averaging about 2,200 square feet, you could add a requirement that no more, or that the minimum unit size is 2,000 square feet, or whatever you think is appropriate, if that's what you're getting at.
I was looking, try to get consistency between the two phases. That was one of the questions, and trying to go back and remember what we had, and if we actually did have at that point, a unit size, which I don't think we did. That's why I was asking. Okay.
Chairman, that fits my memory of the LUR zoning conditions that were applied to Phase 1. But we do want consistency. That's why we're asking for consistency on building materials. I mean, Phase 1 and Phase 2, we want these to feel like the same community.
Okay. That's all the questions I had. I'm going to open it up for comments from the commissioners. Commissioner Leota?
Well, I think the questions that I asked basically are my comments. I'm concerned a little bit about the layout. I'm concerned about visitor parking. I'm concerned about emergency service access for a very long dead-end street. I think there should be something to address the buffering between the Crestwinds facility and this one. And I can tell you from 40 years of experience in the development industry, landscaping is not an effective sound screen. Sound screens need to be solid for them to be effective in any significant way. So landscaping, even if it's dense, will let sound through and still be a nuisance. Those are my comments.
Okay. Thank you. Mr. Chris?
Thanks. So, I disagreed with the rezoning of the property immediately to the south of this property. So in the spirit of that same disagreement, I disagree with the rezoning of this property. It's not within the step-down land use model. It's within our comprehensive plan. We're removing a significant number of trees by constructing this this development, especially in the dense nature in which it is being proposed. This neighborhood does not look like Peachtree City to me. It doesn't look like a neighborhood in Peachtree City. It doesn't have a cart path. It doesn't have access to a cart path. It's just townhomes kind of stuffed in between train tracks and power lines. I don't see I don't see why we would allow this. It's like I said, it's just not within what Peachtree City really looks like to me. I understand the issue about economic viability, and we are stuck now with the property immediately to the south being developed in a similar way. And so, we can't stop the current, zoning. We can't stop them from taking down all those trees tomorrow if they, I guess if they wanted to. So, I mean, you know, we've got 12 conditions here right now, 12 conditions already from staff. So you can tell we're really trying to squeeze this in, right? And, you know, I think Ray's got a lot of good concerns. You know, I think we all brought up some good concerns here today. You know, I mean, I'm open to rezoning if we have excellent conditions in place, and I think staff has already done a good job. But you know, from my perspective, I think we need less units. I think we need more parking. I think we need more public facilities. I'm happy to see the park. I don't think it's enough for 73 units. I'd like to see a cart path. I'd like to see more preservation of trees, and maybe even a solid barrier that would provide some soundproofing here. So I just don't think this is enough. I don't think it's in the spirit of Peachtree City, and I'm not in favor of it.
Thank you. Commissioner Hamner?
Yeah, Commissioner Chris took a lot of my talking points, so thank you for that. But there's one in particular that I just want to really highlight, which again has already been addressed, but still is worth detailing out a bit more. Policy 7 of the plan of the comprehensive plan: utilize step-down residential density so that higher density is located within and next to village centers, and stepping down to medium density, and finally stepping down to low density furthest from the visitors village center. Page 48 of the comprehensive plan clearly shows that this is not within what would even be a 15-minute walk radius of the nearest village center on this. And again, I know that we're talking earlier about, you know, what our opinion would be of this area given the others that are around there. It's clearly not this in terms of what we would want out of Peachtree City, what is immediately next to it as well. I also was thinking about code 1304 within our code of ordinances. There's one that says that, you know, we should, code number 3 within 1304, when we think about these zoning proposals, we have to think about, quote, this will adversely affect the existing use or usability of adjacent or nearby property. I think that clearly is going to impact a number of people in terms of the property that they have right now, and the way that they use it, and are getting value out of that as well. So for those reasons, in particular, I am not in support of this rezoning.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Johnson?
So as previously stated, there are already 12 recommendations if this were to be approved, and then I believe between us we've come up with even some more that we would consider adding. So I also agree that I just don't think this fits with Peachtree City. If we need this many changes, I just don't think it's the right way to go. So I'm not in favor of this proposal.
Commissioner Reeves?
I would agree. There's not much more that I can add to any of what's already been said. It just does not fit and feel like Peachtree City. Thanks.
And most of my comments were already verbalized by my fellow commissioners. This is no better way to put it, this is a bad piece of property. Actually, 2 bad pieces of property. And it's unfortunate that the location is where it is. I really don't know what can be done if this commission would decide to deny this with that other piece of property that was annexed in through the legislature. It is landlocked, no doubt. And I can see, as we had discussed on the south, phase 1, you know, a lot of issues just related to that original phase. Agree with my fellow commissioners that there are a significant number of conditions and recommendations just from staff that carried over from phase 1, and now adding in some of the other issues that we've brought about and discussed for phase 2. And in my view, there's some significant issues and significant concerns that I've heard from not only the public but also the commission. So with that being said, I'm going to go ahead and open it up for a motion, either approve or deny the item.
I move to deny PH-23-10, the rezoning request. Recommend denial.
Okay. We have a motion to recommend denial of PH 23, and make sure I get the right number. Yes, PH 23-10. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a recommendation to deny and a second. Do we have any other discussion before the vote? Commissions? No? No discussion? Okay, that being said, all those in favor of denial of PH 23-10 signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Okay. PH 23-10 is denied.
Recommend.
I mean, I'm
for
sorry, recommend denied. Yes, thank you.
The topography is about a 10-foot, 15-foot difference in topography between Crestwind and Hill, I think. And the power line is about 30 feet up the high tension power line.
Right.
I wouldn't want to buy a house next to the railroad track.
Appreciate that. Thank you. Okay, moving on, we have the conceptual site plan, 23-11-01, warehouse office, 1301 MOBA Drive.
We're not really supposed to have
No.
offline conversations.
Excuse me,
I'm
sir.
sorry.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
So I am pitch hitting for Laura, and so please forgive me. I'm going to do the best I can, but it's not going to be as thorough or as good a job as Laura normally does. The first one is for 1301 MOBA Drive. It is a conceptual site plan for a new warehouse and office. I'm sorry. Yes, warehouse office of 60,000 square feet. It is, so there's 3 lots that are kind of sandwiched in between this U, and it is these 2 lots here. You may remember we just had a conceptual site plan for the nursery on this 3rd lot. Okay. So the conceptual site plan does meet all of the zoning conditions. You may remember many years ago, actually it wasn't that many, but it feels like it, there was a variance that was approved for this middle lot, which is sort of this area right here, to reduce their zoning setback from 50 to 30 feet. They're fine, they're nowhere near it. So it does meet all of the setback zoning conditions. It is within 500 feet of a major thoroughfare, that being State Route 54. So at some point in the future, this body will review a elevation plan for that building. They're not doing that tonight, but they will be back. The circulation, as you can see, the truck traffic is completely separated from the vehicular traffic, which is located at the front, we'll call it, the front of this building, and then the truck traffic is located in the rear of the building. They are meeting our minimum parking requirements and also not exceeding our parking requirements. They're providing 77 parking spaces, and they're required to provide 68. One thing that's a little different that they are asking, and only the Planning Commission has the ability to grant, is there is a they are proposing a 50-foot landscape buffer along 54. The ordinance says that 60 is the normal, but that you all have the authority to reduce it, and for every 10 feet you reduce it, they are required to plant 10% more trees. So they're requesting to reduce from 60 to 50, so they, if approved by you, they would have to plant 10% more trees, and that is based on the impervious surface of this property. I hope I've captured everything. I'm so sorry, but the applicant is here to answer any questions that you have.
Good evening, my name's Jason Walls with Highland Land Planning, representing the owners. I don't really have anything to add to what Robin stated, other than we do have a tenant taking up 2 of the spaces in the building. That's a local business just looking to relocate, improve their facilities, outdoor training areas for utility-type training. And in my opinion, this is a fairly low-impact use for these 2 lots in this industrial park, compared with added to the tree farm next door. So 3 uses that have quite a bit of green space available here. So I'll be available to answer any questions you have.
Go ahead and start with Commissioner Leota. Any questions to the applicant?
Yeah, I really only had one question. I think the layout makes a lot of sense for this corner lot on 74 and the entrance road. And you just explained what the training yard was, so it's kind of utility practice training area. So you need kind of a big open space. Okay.
That's not daily, that's maybe once a quarter.
Okay.
For about 3 to 5 days.
The only real question I have is, there doesn't seem to be any real impediment to shift the building left a little bit and up a little bit to get the 60 feet along Route 74. And I was wondering why that can't be done.
It was the simple math for the parking spaces, drive-out parking spaces. I remembered it was not, we weren't there before we had to put the landscaping strip between the sidewalk and the building. That's what caused us to push forward.
So our ordinance requires a 10-foot landscaping strip between the building, and so that 10 feet, I guess, is
So
impacted.
if you just did the math, from the front curb, the parking space, drive-out parking space, sidewalk, landscape strip that's required, building,
Right.
and then the truck turning templates in the back, that's what pushed us forward into that 10 feet.
Okay, I understand that, but why can't that whole module, building and parking, just shift 10 feet, would be essentially east?
Do you mean-
you have,
do you mean
looks like you have plenty
shifting
of
it-
room in the
Yeah, east
truck
is-
court to move that curb line in
Well,
the
I
same
mean,
direction.
For a truck to come in and back in and have a 70 or so foot, 53-foot trailer with cab,
Yeah.
there doing his stuff and having other people coming in and around, that depth of that's actually pretty tight for the loading dock area.
But I guess what I'm asking is, you have plenty of space
When you say
between
east,
that
you mean that way? So east is
upper
straight up, yeah.
edge of the paving. You've got
Oh, you know,
50
Yeah,
feet or
that's a
something
front-
to
I'm
move
sorry,
it.
that's a front setback, so we're not,
That's
I would
right.
love to do that.
So they
so
can't-
our
they
ordinance
can't move into
prohibits,
that?
that's right, our ordinance prohibits having,
understand.
driveways, parking, and these kind of service areas in that front setback.
Okay.
So
All right,
I
so
see
that's
what-
the explanation.
That's
We
why it
have-
wasn't clicking on me, I apologize, yep.
Yes,
Okay,
we
it
have
just
3
didn't
or
make
4
any
sides.
sense initially, why, with so much room there, why it couldn't just shift 10 feet?
Yeah, 3 or 4 sides is the front on this lot, so the highway, and
Right.
I guess it's really the same road, Moba Drive.
Right.
I'm assuming that area up there will be where we put quite a bit of landscaping. So our courtyard will be, our trucking area will be screened fairly well from I think that's a ball field over there, or a soccer field. So we'll have decent screening on all 4 sides of this site.
That's really the only question I had, Mr. Chairman.
Sure. Commissioner Crids?
Ray just
questions?
asked all my questions, so I'm good.
Commissioner Hamner? Questions, comments?
Just one question for city staff, and I'll be impressed if you get this one. Do you know how much the MOBA soccer complex that's next door to it, how far back what's the distance between Highway 74 and the drive that's there? And how is it comparable to this, do you know?
I don't,
Okay.
I'm sorry.
I was just curious, I just wanted to use that to gauge in terms of how close this would be to.
So whether or not it's consistent with the
Yeah.
MOBA development, I'm so sorry, no, I don't have that. No, so you know
on the
the big
side.
building that's over here?
Yep.
He's asking what is the buffer between their development and 74?
That's it,
If you give me a few minutes, I might be able to do that
okay,
on my computer.
okay.
Commissioner Johnson, questions, comments?
I have no questions.
Commissioner Reeves?
No questions. It's already been asked and answered.
Any comments?
No comments.
Commissioner Johnson?
No comments?
And I don't have any questions. Everything was basically asked and discussed from the other commissioners. Would be nice, I agree, to see in comparison between the two.
It's 60 feet,
It's 60 feet?
Okay.
Okay.
but they don't have a truck yard. That's interesting, is they don't have a truck service. What are they doing there that they don't need big trucks? Soccer, yes, that's true. Thank you.
Okay, any other comments or questions from the commissioners? No? That being said, do we have a motion for recommendation?
I move to recommend approval of 23-11-01.
Okay, we have a recommendation for approval. Do we have a second?
I second.
Approval in a second. Any other discussion, questions? None? Okay, let's have a vote. All those in favor of recommending approval of 2311-01, conceptual site plan 1301 MOBA Drive, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed?
Great.
Recommendation for approval.
Well, you all actually make you're the final say on that one. So, this last one is a building elevation for our, can I say this? One of my favorite restaurants in the city? Am I allowed to say that? This is for Azul Tequila, Taqueria, and Cantina at 100 Lexington Circle. It is within one of our design guidelines, and that was required when this whole area was rezoned to this LUC designation. And so those guidelines include some pretty detailed specifications on color. The applicant is requesting to change the color of the facade. Right now it is kind of a tan, darker tan color with sort of these lighter tan outlines. Got a gray roof and some natural stone you can see here. And they would like to go, surprise, a brighter, kind of a whitish color. This guidelines actually has approval for a white color, and so the request is compliant with those guidelines. They're requesting white dove, which is very similar to China white, which is actually quite a bright white. They are asking for this sort of brownish color at the roof, kind of to accent and tie in sort of these wood tones that they are kind of giving it a natural color. That's, they're requesting, what is the color here? I'm sorry. There it is. Oh, and it's not that. It's the color of the trim around the windows and the door is Black Magic, which is very similar to Weather Vane, which is part of that. Oh, there it is. And then this brown color is called Cedar Bark. We don't have a comparable to that color. Now, then they're also asking to do a light paint wash over the natural stone. The ordinance does not strictly prohibit this. It is something that we have not seen in the city, and I think the applicant was bringing a sample of that for us to look at. And then the last item is they're asking for a dark charcoal roof. Most of the requirements in the ordinance are no longer available. The only one that is called slate, and so slate is more, well, it has more of a bluish look as opposed to the dark charcoal. And since since most of these products are not made anymore, it's really up to y'all to decide if you think the whole package, it looks good. And so maybe the applicant could come up and show us the color of the samples. Other than that, staff believes that it does meet the available design guidelines. I'd like to see this too.
That's the color we call RE1?
This one is?
This,
After
this is
the-
the same stone that we have right now. We just put paint called iron one.
Just like it, so that's the chimney stone.
Yeah.
That's the chimney and,
Wash it a little bit.
This is what it looks like now?
No,
Yeah.
it-
No, no.
no, that's
Well, it'll be-
what, that's what they're
We don't
proposing.
want to-
Okay.
Yeah,
Just the material.
you can see on the back. That's kind of
Yeah.
just like that.
Yeah, the color right now.
Dark, perhaps.
Okay, do we have any questions or comments?
I have a question. I have a question just for staff. We went and did the design guidelines for like the
Right.
Walmart area, and we renovated those. Should we be doing the same for this?
So these are a little bit different because they were actually part of the zoning conditions. So it's not an overlay that we can go through and clean up as neat and easily as this. So in order for us to change them, it's an actual zoning action, and we could certainly, you can recommend that to the city council, who can then tell us if that's something they'd like us to do, staff to do. I know it's been brought up by some members of the city council before, and they may be interested in that, doing that.
Yeah, I mean, I think we probably should at least think about that, or think about some sort of, catch-all solution where we say, the materials suggested or similar materials in our city ordinances, something to that effect.
And that's kind of what we try to do here by comparing like white china to his color, and same with the roof. There is a roof color that's available. The slate is still available. He's asking, he believes that the design of his proposed building would fit better with the darker color roof, and there isn't a comparable one of that.
So then my follow-up question to you, Robin, would be, is he coming to us today because he has to no matter what?
Yes.
Okay, so even if we update the zoning or the ordinances to allow similar materials or paint, then it won't matter, they still have to come to us anyway?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
That's a good point.
Questions, comments? Commissioner Hamner?
No questions. Just to comment, I really like the design. I think it looks really good.
Mr. Johnson?
I love the design. I love the colors. I love the cedar, which adds some contrast. And I love that it's some stone, some wood, just all the mixture. I love it. I think it looks great.
Commissioner Reeves?
I think it looks great as well.
I first like to thank you for coming
Yeah.
beforehand in front of the commission for approval. Thank you very much for doing that. We all appreciate that. Unfortunately, we've run into two situations where that did not happen. So thank you very much for that. I do like the refresh on it. My only question, and this is, or comment, is based upon the other two that we've seen. Did you ever consider a a little more of an off-white than the China white?
Well, I mean, I open suggest, you have any color that is right now kind of looking like that? I don't want to go, what is the dentist right there?
Yeah, that's
Correct.
the white china.
That's the China white, yeah.
China.
I don't want to be exactly the same, because we already have the black, the charcoal roof.
Right,
So I don't want to like copy him exactly, it's just a little bit
yeah.
difference.
And that's why I didn't know if there was any, oh, I'm sorry, I'm getting microphone. Apologize. If you could come up to the microphone, I'm sorry. No, I was just, and that's why I was asking if there was any consideration of a little more of an off-white than what you were looking at.
If you guys want me, I can use the same kind of white that he has, the dentist has, and just.
There's a color on the other side of the city, so it wouldn't be competing, that, have you all been to Super Chicks in the avenues? That's called, believe it or not, it's called Eater Gray, but it's not gray. It's
Okay.
white, I
Okay.
promise. It's white, but it's because of the undertones of it, it reduces the glare. And it's also well, you're not brick. I was gonna say they're a painted brick facility, but that's a color that's been successful. I mean, there's nothing to say that this color won't be successful
Oh,
either. White-
and not at all. I hate to say this, my first view of this, I thought Alpine.
Well, the
That's, I thought Germany, Austria, Alpine, Swiss,
If you
sort
read-
of thing, just
I'm
because of the white and the way the building is constructed. And that's why I was just wondering, just a little bit more of an off-white, backing it off a little bit, might give a little, move that away from that kind of view.
If you really seeing on the, I mean, not on the picture because that looks kind of tricky. If you really seeing like the dog white, physically, it's not that bad. But like I say, I mean, we just want to do some change because we always being 12 years there with the same colors. We already paint twice with the same colors.
And understand
And we
it-
don't want to bring the same again.
Yeah.
And, you know,
And definitely, the refresh looks really good.
Yeah.
And I think everyone is definitely in favor. It's just one of those, I'm just, having you think about just a little bit more. And again, that's just a suggestion.
I mean,
at
like I say,
all.
I'm not opposed to it. I mean, I can see the colors, and if it's probably kind of similar to me, that'd be fine for me. I don't,
I
the
think
combination is kind
That's
of.
a good idea.
Yeah.
A few shades softer than that white, it wouldn't be so
Yeah.
glaring, but I think the color palette works really well, though.
Thank
Yeah.
you. And I don't know if you see on the right there the green walls. You see that on the first picture? Is the two windows in the back and then
Yes, I was gonna ask what that
What's-
is.
Where?
right there. On
Right
the
there?
auto-
This right here?
No.
No.
On the other photo, that one. You see the green on the top, on more?
See the things? Yeah.
Right there, we go to cover that patio, to enclosure
Mhm.
that patio.
Oh.
Between that wall, right now is the half wall to make the fence for that patio.
Oh, because of the alcohol, in order to serve, it has to be enclosed.
No, not really. We want to do a storage right there. You know what I mean? Right now it's a patio right there, open a patio. We want enclosure. I don't know if Laura avoid that. We want enclosure. That was the look right there in the first picture. Between that wall, because the ceiling is right here, and it's a gap, and then it's the fence. You know what I mean? It's a gap like maybe a foot wide. So all the designers saw like, okay, we just put some plants, make it pretty. So that one we suggest to do some kind of a greenery, like I don't know if now you're related with all the kind of walls on the fake greenery walls, kind of to look pretty. Laura said, you know what? Ask them because I don't know if you can do it or not. If we cannot, it's not fine with us. I mean, it's no big deal.
So
We
we've
can put some
done,
flowers or some.
we have done other installations, I'm thinking down by the Wilshire, where they installed kind of these growing guide wires on the exterior of the building and then let natural plants grow in there. I don't know if I would recommend fake plants.
The only issue that I have right now, to be honest with you, is the last 5 years has been struggling with the employees. So somebody to take care about that. And then the beginning is going to look nice, when it's green, but they don't take care about putting water on it or something. It's got to be, you know what I mean? That's why, I don't know if, or maybe some kind of succulent plants and make it nice. I don't know. That's why I'm asking you guys, what do you guys think? Or otherwise, just plain and don't put anything? I mean,
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, there are several different kind of creeping type vines, even including something that's evergreen like jasmine. There's different ones like that that I actually have in my landscaping. So I mean, it's always something you can
okay.
you can always go to the nursery
Okay.
and ask them. Of course, something that's low maintenance,
Low maintenance,
doesn't
okay.
really need much pruning.
So
or
you
anything
like
like
to
that?
have more like natural, no?
Yeah.
natural-
Yeah, I think that's the concern
Yeah,
is,
I think it would look much better being
That's
natural
fine.
than
That's fine for us,
than
yeah.
artificial.
Okay.
Okay, no, definitely appreciate it. So, anything else from the commissioners? Okay, do we have a motion for recommendation?
I make a motion that we approve agenda item 23-11-02, building elevations for Azul Tequila, Taqueria, and Cantina.
We make a condition about the dove. Soft and white, yeah. The dove gray and the natural plants.
Okay,
Just
say it again.
With the dove gray and the natural plants, right?
Is that right? Yes. With
well,
the-
did you want, maybe instead of a specific color,
Oh, yeah.
is basically work with staff to identify an appropriate
Yes.
color?
Yes.
White that isn't
Yes.
high
Okay.
glare? Okay. And then, if you're approving the elevation, I mean, he does show that, but you might want to specify that those have to be natural plants. Is that what I'm getting?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, so, with the condition that the applicant works with staff on the base color, to be more, less bright white, maybe more of an off-white, and use natural plants.
Okay. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second, so we have a motion for approval with the two conditions stated by the commissioner. Any other discussion? No. Okay. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I do believe that we are going to have a December 11th agenda. I told Laura this morning when she told me that we got a couple of applications, I'm like, darn it, we're gonna have to do our job.
In December.
So, I don't, at this point, staff doesn't recommend canceling that
Okay.
meeting.
Sounds good. Okay, anything else, Robin?
I appreciate y'all sticking with me.
Move to adjourn?
Motion
Second.
carries.